The next thing we're going to look at are exponential properties. So the goal here is going to be to simplify expressions using properties of exponents. And where we're going with this is we're going to be looking at polynomials. So just as an example, what is a cubed times a squared? So I'm looking at what is a cubed times a squared. Well, I'm going to just write out what this means. So a cubed means a times a times a. So that is my a cubed. I'm multiplying this by a squared. A squared is a times a. And what I've just written down is I've written down a being multiplied by itself 5 times. So this is really a to the 5th. So what we had here was that a cubed times a squared was a to the 5th. And that's going to lead us to the first rule of exponents. The first rule is that a to the m times a to the n equals a to the m plus n. So when you have the same base, this a here is your base, and you're multiplying, what you want to do is add the exponents together. So let's do some examples here. This is 3 squared times 3 to the 6 times 3. Really, there's a 1 here. We don't write it, but there's a 1 here. Because all of those have the same base, and I'm multiplying, all I have to do is add up the exponents. So my exponent will be 2 plus 6 plus 1, which is 9. For my second example, I have a lot of different variables, so I'm going to kind of put them together. We'll start with my coefficients first. So 2 times 5 is 10. Next, I'll look at my x terms. So I have an x there, and I have an x there. This first one has a 3. The second one, we don't write it, but it has a 1. Because I'm multiplying x cubed times x to the 1, I'll add the exponents and get x to the 4th. Next, I'll look at the y's. Hopefully you can see this yellow. So I have y to the 5th and a y squared. Again, because we're multiplying, I'm going to add the exponents and get y to the 7th. And then lastly, my z's. We don't write it. There's a 1 right here on this first one. Since I'm multiplying, I will add the exponents, so I get z to the 4th. So my answer is 10x to the 4th, y to the 7th, z to the 4th. Next thing I want to look at is what is a to the 5th divided by a squared? And let me write out what this means. So a to the 5th means a times a times a times a times a. So 5 of them. A squared means a times a. What you see here is that 2 of my a's are going to cancel. So this a and that a, this a and that a. And what I'm left with is a cubed. So what we have here is that a to the 5th over a squared equals a cubed. Because 2 of them canceled, I was left with 3. That example is going to lead us to our next rule. Our next rule is that a to the m divided by a to the n is a to the m minus n. So you're going to take that exponent that was on the top minus the exponent that was on the bottom. So there's a couple examples here. 7 to the 13th divided by 7 to the 5th. Well, because they have the same base, I'm just going to subtract my exponents. So I'll have 13 minus 5, which is 7 to the 8th. For my next one, I have 5a cubed b to the 5th c squared divided by a times b cubed times c. Well, the first thing I think we should do is probably simplify this a times a. So I'll get 5a cubed b to the 5th c squared divided by a squared b cubed c. And now we're going to do what we did on the last example on the previous rule. We're going to start looking variable by variable. So first thing, I don't have any just plain coefficients except for this 5. So that 5 is going to stay there. The next thing I'm going to look at, though, are my a's. So here's an a and here's an a. So I'll do a to the 3 minus 2. Next, I'm going to look at my b's. So I have b to the 5th and b cubed. So it'll be b to the 5 minus 3. And then lastly, I have c squared and c to the 1 on the bottom. So c to the 2 minus 1. So my final answer, once I simplify all these exponents, is going to be 5a to the 1, b squared, so 5 minus 3 is 2, and c to the 1. So 5ab squared times c. Now let's look at what is a squared cubed. So what that means is you're going to write a squared 3 times. So since you're cubing it, a squared times a squared times a squared. Next, each of these a squareds is a times a. And now what have we written down? We've written down a 6 times. So a squared cubed is a to the 6. And if you see that kind of pattern there, you'll know our next rule. Our rule is that a to the m to the n is a to the m times n. So you're going to multiply the two exponents. There are a couple other rules that go hand in hand with this one, so we're not going to do an example first. I'll just show them to you. So first one, ab to the m is a to the m times b to the m. You kind of distribute that exponent. That's only for multiplication though. So really important. This is not true for addition. So you can't say that a plus b to the m is a to the m plus b to the m. That's very much wrong. Don't do that. It's only if you have multiplication. And then also division. So a divided by b to the m is a to the m divided by b to the m. So in both of those cases, you can just kind of distribute your exponent, but not for addition and not for subtraction. So let's do a couple more examples here. For my first one, I have x cubed y z squared all to the 4th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of distribute that exponent. So it'll be x cubed times 4, y to the 1 times 4, z to the 2 times 4. And that gives me x to the 12th, y to the 4th, z to the 8th. Next, a cubed b divided by c to the 8th d to the 5th all squared. Because we're just multiplying and dividing, I can distribute that 2 to everything. So it'll be a to the 3 times 2, b to the 1 times 2, divided by c to the 8 times 2, and then d to the 5th times 2. So I get a to the 6th times b squared over c to the 16th times d to the 10th. Now let's do a couple more harder ones. So for this first one, we're going to kind of go through variable by variable. So let's start with just coefficients. So I have a 3 here, a 10 here, and a 2 on the bottom. So that gives me 30 on the top and 2 on the bottom. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So that's my first piece. Next, let's look at all my a terms. So here's an a term, here's an a term, and here's an a term. So it looks like, because I'm multiplying on the top, I'm going to have 3 times 4. But then I'm dividing by a to the 4th, so I'm going to subtract 4 from that exponent. And then I'll look at all my b terms. So my b terms, I have 1 there, 1 here, and 1 here. So it looks like on the top, I am multiplying. Oops, and this should have been a plus there. I don't know why I didn't write that. So this should be a 1 plus 3. And then I'm dividing by b squared, so I will subtract 2. So it looks like my answer is 15, let's see, 3 plus 4 minus 4 is cubed. And then b to the 1 plus 3 is 4 minus 2 is 2. So 15a cubed b squared. And now let's come down to the second problem. We're going to have some parentheses to deal with before we do anything else. So I'm going to deal with this set of parentheses first. Everything in that problem is being cubed, so I need to distribute first. So we'll have 3ab squared. And then 2 cubed is 8. We don't really need parentheses. So 8a to the 4th, and then cubed. Remember that means multiply, so a to the 12th. B squared and then cubed. Again, that means multiply, so b to the 6th. All over 6, a to the 5th, b to the 7th, and that's going to be squared. Now we have a couple options here. We could simplify the inside of the parentheses and then square it, or we could square everything. I think it might be easier to simplify what's inside the parentheses first, and then we'll square it. So let's start with my coefficients. So I have a 3, a 6, and an 8. So 3 times 8 is 24. 24 divided by 6 is a positive 4. So I'll have a 4 on the top. Next, let's look at my a term. So I have an a here, an a here, and an a here. So I think my coefficient for a is going to be 1 plus 12, that's coming from the numerator, minus 5, that's coming from the denominator. Now I'll look at my b term. So I have b squared, a b to the 6th, and a b to the 7th on the bottom. So on the top, it'll be 2 plus 6, and then subtract 7 on the bottom. And don't forget, this whole thing is being squared. So if I simplify this inside first, it looks like 4a to the 8th, b to the 1. And all that's being squared. Since the whole thing is being squared, we're going to distribute that too. So 4 squared is 16. A to the 8th squared would be a to the 8 times 2. B to the 1 squared would be b to the 1 times 2. So 16, a to the 16th, b squared. That would be our final answer.